What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. Okay, so we are jumping into Red Hood and the Outlaws. Yes, Red Hood and the Outlaws. Okay, let me tell you something, man. This is like one of the best stories that I've ever read in comic books ever. When Scott Lobdell decides to bring out the big guns, that's exactly what he does. And it is amazing to see. Like, the whole run of Red Hood has been stellar, but I think this story is probably the best story so far. So initially what this does is this picks up really with like Red Hood in the apartment of a guy. Now, this initially kind of refreshes people on Red Hood because a lot of people who are familiar with the character of Red Hood always sort of made, kind of saw him as something akin to like the Punisher, right? Like a guy who goes in and just kills villains everywhere he finds them. But in Red Hood and the Outlaws, he's more tame and he doesn't really do that because, again, the promise was made to Batman that he would try Batman's way of doing things, which was basically stopping crime without actually killing people. And it's a really, really cool moment here because what this does is it will change everything in a lot of different ways. And initially, this picks up with essentially just like a mobster who's shown up into town for the purpose of doing business with Oswald Cobblepot. Now, a lot of people look at this and they say, okay, for the character of the Penguin, he's always somewhat of a background character. He's a main villain of Batman, but you don't see him all that often. But he does have a lot of business dealings. He's an arms dealer, he deals in drugs and, money laundering and all kinds of different things. And so where Red Hood is able to instill enough fear in this guy to basically send him hacking, at the end of the day, he still doesn't. And it's one of these things where they're kind of reluctant because one thing to bear in mind is that when it comes to criminals in Gotham City, by and large, it's very easy to recognize them as just kind of being a Gotham City element, right? Like the Joker operates outside of, inside of Gotham City and Two-Face is in Gotham. But a lot of these guys, because they're part of the criminal underworld, have some pretty long fingers, being able to reach out into other parts of the world they don't normally visit. And so if you were to screw over the Penguin, just because you leave the US doesn't mean you're not going to die. And so it's really a dangerous precedent to get in bed with a villain on that scale. And so it's kind of intriguing here because what this does is it switches over to Artemis and Bizarro. Now remember, Bizarro's intelligence has basically been degrading over time with regards to the events that have been going on. Lex Luthor had basically injected him with kind of a serum that sort of completed him, that it was only ever really a temporary thing. And the time would come when basically it would begin to drop off. And Artemis has been very, very hesitant about Bizarro's character, which is to say she's been very unsure about whether or not he's actually a good guy. And so her talking to him is more or less, you've been manipulating us, you've been using us to your own ends. We're not as smart as you are, so we can't easily pick up on what it is that you're doing, but just be aware, I'm keeping an eye out. I want to know what you're doing, but if you're not going to tell me, then I'll basically keep an eye out and see what's going on. Now from here, we switch over to one of the coolest things. Scott Lobdell almost does a kind of mini Madripoor. And what I mean by that is in Marvel Comics, you have an island, or really a country called Madripoor, and it's like a criminal haven is what it is. No one really goes there. Superheroes don't go there because what goes on in Madripoor is like the Wild West. You go in there, you screw somebody over. It's like Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. Break a wheel and break a deal, face the wheel. It's one of those crazy things. And so with this, we kind of pick up in this hotel where it's kind of like a hotel for henchmen, whereas like all these guys who have been henchmen for various villains over the years are all sort of meeting with each other and they talk about jobs they're doing and they sort of exchange information like, hey, the Penguin has a really, really good gig coming up if you're looking to get work over there. And it's kind of cool. You almost always assume something like that existed, but you never really gave it a whole lot of thought. It was never like, I wonder if the henchmen from different villains meet up and if like henchmen, like two henchmen will work for Two-Face and then one of them will find a more stable gig working for the Joker. It's a really cool thing. But Bizarro shows up here. And the reason why is because initially he had basically said, hey, look, I've got this project I'm going to go work on. I'm going to go do my own thing. But Jason Todd even has his own reservations. And following Bizarro to this hotel, we end up finding out Bizarro gasses the whole place with the intention of killing all these henchmen. But that's one of the things that it's really more of a stopgap measure. Say Bizarro had gone through with this, which of course he doesn't. He basically ends up stopping, kind of taking pity on them and saying, look, you guys are in desperate times and that's kind of why you do this. But say Bizarro had actually gone through with it and killed them all, there would just be more. Because in Gotham City, there's no lack of supply for people who are struggling financially. And so there's always people looking for like an easy gig, looking for easy money, or people who are on hard times and trying to do what they can given what skill set they have. And so with Red Hood kind of chiming in and saying, hey, look, did you see me because I was invisible? Did you stop because of me? Bizarro's response is no. I did it because I'm ashamed of killing all these people. But Artemis peering around in Bizarro's room, she ends up stumbling across a hidden location and finds like these giant vats of green kryptonite. And then in turn, Bizarro appears and is just kind of like, I wish you hadn't done that. And that's when we end up finding out that what Bizarro's been doing is self-medicating. He's basically an addict. And it's kind of a crazy thing. He's just using synthesized kryptonite in order to keep his intelligence up. Because remember, Bizarro is essentially the opposite of Superman. And so where green kryptonite would kill Superman, green kryptonite seems to give Bizarro life, more or less, to kind of, enhance his abilities and push them even further. But he's basically an addict. Because of the fact that his intelligence has been dropping off, what he's been doing is ingesting green kryptonite in order to keep his intelligence up. And it's a crazy thing. It's an addict's confession is basically what it is. And so from there, you end up switching over to Jason Todd. Now, this is kind of cool because Jason Todd's met by like this super hot chick, right? Who like takes him to a private room after he's basically been gaming the money for like gaming the casino for like all this money and everything. And when he gets in there, he ends up finding out he was brought there by the Penguin. And the reason why is because what Jason Todd had done is he had stolen money from the Penguin and then laundered it through the Penguin's casino. That was his intention, was to bet it in the casino and basically get legit cash instead. And it's actually not the worst decision ever. Inevitably, he was caught, he was busted, and the Penguin's kind of like, okay, so like now we gotta do business as usual. But I want to switch to Bizarro for a second. This is a really, really cool moment. There's this conversation that Bizarro has with Artemis after she busts him, after she catches him. The question is asked, why would you do this? Like why would you turn to like drug use? Essentially self-medicating with kryptonite. And his answer is, because I don't want to go back to being who I was before. I don't want to go back to being the guy that can't form complete sentences, to the guy that can't really string two thoughts together. I don't want to be that guy anymore. And when the question is asked, what's so wrong with that? It's basically like, but I've tasted what it can be like. Like I've seen the world as it can be for me. I've been on this side of the line and I'm terrified of going back, because imagine that one day you're essentially a buffoon. You're a complete and total goof. And then the next day, the universe is at your fingertips. There's nothing you can't do. You are bound by nothing. Would you really just give that up? And it's such a great question to ask. It's such an interesting scenario. Now, of course, he eventually goes in for the kiss and gets rejected. Like, it's kind of sad to see. But it's kind of interesting at the same time. But what this does is it kind of leads, it's almost a shifting of stories, because where you have Bizarro sort of fixing himself and accepting that this is what's going to happen, that either he can self-medicate and who knows what the end result of this will be, or he can just allow things to progress, and for him to regress back to his normal Bizarro form, he ends up making the choice to regress. He destroys these vats of green kryptonite. What you have is Jason Todd, who's kind of going down this really, really dark path. Jason Todd is basically met by the granddaughter of Faye Gunn when he goes out and, goes to like a cafe, to a coffee shop, more or less. Now, Faye Gunn is a character who's old school in DC Comics, and we talked about her previously in Red Hood Rebirth. So if you guys want to know more about her, feel free to go check out the earlier Red Hood stories. You'll find links down in the description. But when it came to her character, she basically used kids for, to kind of fund her lavish lifestyle, use them for crime, for criminal acts, more or less. And she took advantage of them. And so because of that, Jason Todd didn't have the best upbringing when he was in that orphanage. But this granddaughter of Faye Gunn shows up, and she essentially says, look, there are these letters. If Faye Gunn ever went missing or died, I was instructed to bring these letters to you because you're the only one she ever really trusted. That these letters are supposed to be written for you. I don't know what they are. I just know that they're inside this envelope, and I have no clue what's going to happen here. And so it's kind of curious, because then the question becomes, what's in there? And so what we end up doing is switching over to Artemis talking to Lex Luthor. Now, this is one of the cool things, because initially when Lex Luthor had injected Bizarro with green kryptonite, the assumption was that he was doing it out of altruism, right? Because he was a good guy at the time. Like he was good guy Lex Luthor. He was trying to do the right thing, and it made sense. What we end up finding out is, according to Lex Luthor, that was never the case. Now take this for what it's worth, because maybe Lex Luthor's lying, maybe he doesn't want to show a sensitive side, we don't really know here. But what he basically says is, you guys were only ever an experiment. That's all you guys ever were. I wanted to know how Bizarro would function if he was perfected, essentially, and then sent out into the world. And you guys were the ones who would keep him under control. You were the control agents. That's all you ever were. He's going to go back to his old self. That's what he needs. That's what needs to happen. That's the way things need to be. And it's kind of crazy, because Lex Luthor sort of makes this comment where he says, like father, like son. And it's not an offhanded remark. It's a remark of, everybody goes back to the way they used to be. That Bizarro's returning back to his form when he was basically dumb, and Lex Luthor's back to being a bad guy. It's kind of an ironic statement. It's intriguing when you look at it for what it is. And so what I want to do is I want to switch over to the real meat and potatoes of this story, like the best part of this story, which is when Jason Todd begins reading the letters. Now, we're going to kind of do this a little bit out of order in terms of how it actually starts versus where the letters are, but this basically picks up in the old house of Faye Gunn. And when he starts going through these letters, Faye basically tells him, look, this first letter that I'm sending you, this is from me, and I kept this hidden from you. You have letters from your father that I never showed you. And so when you read these letters, you have to keep an open mind. And this is probably some of the most beautiful storytelling that I've ever seen. This is classic Scott Lobdell storytelling, because what ends up happening is the father of Jason Todd sits down and says, I was basically a scumbag. Like, I'm in prison right now, and I was a scumbag back in the day. I never really had anything going for me. I sold drugs to whoever would buy them. But then one day I met your mom, who is this beautiful woman. And sure, I sold to her, but I wanted to make a life with her. And as that time began to progress, as that began to happen, I began to realize she was an incredible person. And so eventually what happens is the mother of Jason takes his father, takes Willis to go meet her parents, and they freak out. They're like, you're dating a drug dealer? How could you be so insane to believe that dating a drug dealer could ever really work out? But love knows no bounds. All love cares about is emotion. How do you feel about a person? And so because of the fact that the two of them were in love, they ended up moving out to some really crappy part of town, and they were basically living in like this really, really ratty apartment. And then one day she gets pregnant. They had all these experiences where they were falling in love and they were creating a family. And it's really one of these things where the father of Jason looked to the horizon and said, we can make a life here. I mean, sure, it won't be the most extravagant life, but we'll be together. And that's the only thing that will ever really matter. That when he looks at his son, he says, I don't want you to become like me. You are going to be the prince of Gotham City. You're going to rule it all one day. You're gonna be the guy that I can look up to one day, that I can look at you and say, as a father, I'm proud. And so eventually what happens is Jason Todd himself gets sick, and Scott Lobdell leaves this a little ambiguous. His father kind of hints, well, maybe it's bad genes or something like that. He doesn't really seem to indicate that Jason Todd had overdosed on anything, that he had somehow accessed the drugs of his father, but whatever the reason is, he ended up getting sick, and the result was that he was going to need all kinds of treatment, which were exceedingly expensive. And so in order to basically do this, his father left, when he had gone clean, he left the clean life and gone to become a henchman, and where he bounced from villain to villain. The way he describes this is almost like he's moving up in the ranks. I worked in the big time, and eventually he ends up getting a gig working for Oswald Cobblepot, ends up working for the Penguin. And in this instance, what the Penguin does is he uses his father as a fall guy. And so essentially when everything comes crashing down, when the actions of the Penguin are revealed, his father's the one that ends up taking the rap, and he gets 20 years to life. And it's just kind of a crushing thing, because as Jason starts going through and reading these letters, he's making this connection to this father that he never really knew anything about. And his father wasn't a guy who just abandoned him. He was a father who was doing the best he could and wanted his son to become better than he was. And so at the tail end of this, Jason Todd finds some pictures that he and his father took when he was really, really young. And Jason Todd seemingly loses it. And what he ends up doing is going to a cemetery and starts digging up the grave of his dad, only to find the coffin's empty. And initially the Penguin's going to destroy it. He's going to kill him. And the Penguin just says no. And he basically just leaves. He essentially walks away. And so what this does is this leads to Jason Todd confronting the Penguin, because there's this great big huge ceremony that's put on, in response to everything that had gone on with, Night of the Monster Men and so on and so forth. But it's basically saying, like, look at Oswald Cobblepot, this guy who's given so much to the city. And a lot of people know what he's about. They know that he's basically crooked, that he's a mobster, but he's putting money in all the right pockets. And because he's doing that, those in power are essentially turning a blind eye. But Jason Todd is not having any of it. This is the return of classic Jason Todd. That's the one people love the most. People like to see him be a good guy, but if you walk up to most Red Hood fans and you say, if you had to choose between the one you have in Rebirth or the version from Under the Red Hood, which one would you pick? They would say, oh, Under the Red Hood, in an instant, no questions asked. And I'm curious, leave a comment and let me know, which one would you guys take? The Under the Red Hood version, the vigilante, like, will kill villains version, or like the one that we have from DC Rebirth? Because I know the one from Rebirth, and even New 52, when he was teamed up with Arsenal, a lot of people, he developed a big fan base there, and a lot of people really did like that version of his character. But when he busts in here, the Penguin kind of looks at him and is like, oh wow, Red Hood's here, okay. So the guy who's basically mini Batman, do your thing, we'll do our little dance, we'll do our little song, you'll take me to jail, I'll be out, everything will be okay. And Jason Todd's response is, no, I'm not coming here to make amends. I'm not coming here to take you to jail. I'm coming here to do what should have been done the entire time. I'm coming here to put a bullet in your head. And it's just like, damn, because the Penguin didn't expect that. Jason Todd takes off his mask, reveals his identity, and by proxy, reveals the identity of Batman. Basically saying, like, I am a kid who was taken in by Bruce Wayne, and just connecting the dots, all the similarities they have together, Penguin immediately picks up on the fact that Batman is Bruce Wayne. But for Jason Todd, he doesn't care, because Penguin's not going to live long enough to be able to tell anybody what's going on. And so it's kind of crazy, because everyone's in shock by this. The cops are totally baffled by the fact that Red Hood's about to kill the Penguin. And it's almost kind of nuts, because the Penguin's final response is, well, good on you, kid. Good on you. You're falling into the criminal element just like everybody else. It's a cutthroat world. There's the strong and those who are too weak to make it. And so what ends up happening is, in this moment, right before he pulls the trigger, Jason Todd muses to himself and he says, on the day I was born, my father swore that I would be the Prince of Gotham. And then he pulls the trigger, shoots the Penguin in the face, and says, now I am. And it's just like, damn, like it's Scott Lobdell. Give it up for Scott Lobdell, ladies and gentlemen. The other half half of this is that with everything that's going on with Bizarro, with his intelligence regressing, the ship's more or less going into self-destruct. And so Jason Todd's immediate response, once he ends up figuring out what's going on, is to go over there and check it out. But while that's happening, while Artemis is dealing with the ship crashing into Gotham, while Jason Todd's racing back over to where the ship's at or where it's going to land, trying to find a way to get in there, him shooting Oswald Cobblepot in the face is all being watched by Bruce Wayne, all being watched by Batman. And when Alfred chimes in, he says the whole Bat family is on the phone. Like Dick Grayson, Barbara Gordon, Tim Drake, they're all on the phone and they want to know what they should do. And Batman's response is, tell him to stand down. I'll bring him in. And it's one, dude, this is one of the coolest things ever. Because what happens is Jason Todd initially has his cloaking device and that shuts down. You know, that basically shuts down, so he's available to the police. And, you know, of course, they're like, hey, you got to stop, you know, all that kind of stuff. And so his response is, okay, I'm not dealing with cops right now. I got more important things to worry about. His intention is to race off and to jump on this ship, to board it, and then to work alongside Artemis and Bizarro to stop it from crashing into Gotham. As soon as he jumps off, the bat rope comes flying out, grabs him by the leg, and yanks him down. And it's just like, damn, because it's crazy. I love the way Scott Lobdell does this, right? Because it's like, well, the boss is home. The boss is back, and he is very, very angry. And it's just like, damn, dude. And here's the thing. Here's a crazy thing about this. Like, you would expect a fight between like Jason Todd and Batman to be like drawn out and super cool. No. Batman makes quick work of him. I mean, it's a kick to the face, it's a block shot, it's a backhand, and Jason Todd's down. But it's kind of a cool moment because what this does is it really shows Jason Todd in comparison to Batman, it really shows that he just doesn't really stand a chance, right? Like, you were never on my level. I just led you to believe you were. Batman just like takes it to him and just starts pummeling him. But Bizarro swoops in, smashes Batman through the building, grabs Jason Todd and leaves and says, Artemis told me to come and get you. And it's crazy because at this moment, Bizarro has severely regressed. He's gone back to the almost to the way he was before. And in this instant, they don't really seem to know exactly what it is they can do here. Like, there doesn't really seem to be a way to shut the ship down because the auto-destruct system is tied into Bizarro's knowledge, and that knowledge is essentially gone. And so there's no real way to end it. And so what ends up happening here is Bizarro opens a door to like a time and space dimension, you know, like the one thing that he's still cognizant of. He says, I can go anywhere and anytime, and he takes off through the door, you know, intending to go back in time long enough to stop any of this from happening. And so when that happens, he races out, he's basically gone. The ship essentially blinks away along with it, but along the way, Artemis and Jason Todd finally kiss. Thank God, Scott Lobdell. They've been dancing around this long enough. Anybody who was reading Red Hood and the Outlaws knew it was only a matter of time before these two started bumping uglies. Everybody knew it was only a matter of time before that happened. But Artemis basically throws him out. She's like, you know, somebody has to go after Bizarro. It's gonna be me. She throws him out of the ship and then she blinks away, just kind of teleports away along with it. And we have no clue where they've gone to. And for Jason Todd, this is crushing because in one fell swoop, everything he loves has come crashing down. In a singular night, he got letters from his father, realizing his father wasn't nearly as bad as he was. He ended up learning that his mother seemingly overdosed because his father introduced her into drugs, into drugs in the first place. He ends up killing Oswald Cobblepot. Bizarro's regressed back down to his current form. He disappears in a ship alongside Artemis. The whole world of Jason Todd is essentially gone. And when Jason Todd is standing there and he's mourning, he asks Batman, he's like, you're standing behind me, aren't you? And he immediately goes to attack. Batman blocks, punches, Jason Todd's down. And that's it. And it's just like, wow. I mean, it's insane to see just how easily crushed he was by Bruce Wayne. And you would kind of expect that because Bruce Wayne is the teacher. I mean, he's the original, but it's super cool to see this whole thing unfold. And so in response to this, when Batman goes to take Jason Todd, to basically take him back to wherever he's going to take him, the Batcave or what have you, there's suddenly an arrow that snaps right into Batman's leg, shuts down, part of his suit. Red smoke goes everywhere, knocks him out, and Arsenal picks up Jason Todd and says, I got you, man. And they end up getting out of there. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.